Welcome to the Indie KidLit podcast. Join Marti Dumas and Elena Page on their quest to help children's and middle grade authors find the right audience and sell more books.
Welcome to the Indie KidLit podcast. I'm Elena Page.
And I'm Marti Dumas, and today we are joined by the fabulous Tracy Babler. On Tracy's website, she boils herself down into a few essential titles: writer, fundraiser, grammar nerd, which is an excellent one, and most importantly, storyteller. Tracy spends a lot of her day helping organizations create and improve writing so that it gets to the real heart of the story. So it's not surprising then that when you add another one of her titles into the mix, Mom, What is Born is a popular blog and podcast called Lou and Bean Read, which highlights the stories that she and her girls are enjoying together and helps connect other parents and young readers to amazing new books and the authors that made them. And we're so excited to have her here. Welcome, Tracy.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, you know what? I just realized that I never have said your last name out loud before.
Yeah,
is that the right way to say it?
Babler,
it's Babler, but it only has the one B.
I know. It's not my name. I'm not Swiss, but
you're like, we'll go with it. That's awesome.
I should hire you to write every bio I ever need, because that was better than I've ever done before.
Haha. I think that it might end up being that. Thank you. Very cool. But I think that might end up being one of those things that you have to trade off with your friends, right? Like, where you're like, I don't know me. What do I know about me? Right? Like, that's
talk about yourself and write about yourself.
Absolutely. My little tagline that I use for everything now, mom, teacher, writer, was my friend Damien off the cuff. Like, he was just like, oh, you should be my fabulous friend. This mom, teacher, writer, her name is Marti Dumas. I was like, what? You just literally summed up my life in 3 words. Oh. Good job, Damien.
Well, thank you very much for that lovely intro.
Yeah, that's great. So we are hoping to be able to talk with you today. We have a lot of children's book authors who listen in, children's and middle grade authors, and a lot of them are starting to hear things about bloggers, book bloggers, mom bloggers, like the things that have to do with blogs. And then now people are starting to hear more things about podcasts. But I feel like in order for people to be able to even know exactly what questions they have, it's important to be able to hear where someone else was coming so that they know why they were in the game in the first place. So do you mind kind of taking us back to the beginning and telling us how you ended up starting your Lou and Bean Read?
Sure. Well, I started Lou and Bean Read totally on a whim, honestly. I'm a writer by trade. I write about racial and economic justice in the Twin Cities area, which is St. Paul and Minneapolis and Minnesota. And I read all the time. I love reading. I've always loved reading. But I found that when I had kids, I wasn't enjoying my reading time with them as much as I thought I would. We were going to the library, or we were being gifted books, and we were reading them, and I was like, okay, man, I'm just not, I don't really want to do this. And I was surprised because I love books and I love reading so much. And because I was new as a mom and new to parenting, I hadn't delved into children's literature the way I had my whole life with adult literature. And so I started researching. What are better books that my family's going to like? Where are the diverse books? Where are the books that meet my family's values? Where are the books that are literature and not just fluff, even for babies and toddlers? And so I started researching that. And then I started finding podcasts, and I started finding blogs, and I started following some people who had really wonderful recommendations. And I just started recommending those kinds of books to my friends, and ultimately decided there's more to this. I can build something. I should be offering these suggestions to other parents like me who didn't know where to start with kids books. And then when I started listening to kids podcasts, kids books, KidLit podcasts, they're called, I found that so many of the podcasts were geared towards adults. And I thought that was just fascinating because my family listens to all kinds of different podcasts, and my kids listen to a bunch of podcasts, but there wasn't anything that I could find easily for them that was related to kids' books. So we just decided, let's use what we're learning, let's connect with authors, and let's have kids make a podcast for kids about kids' books.
Okay, so that was really cool. But just in case that there happens to be a stray person who hasn't listened to your podcast yet, do you mind telling people a little bit about the format of Lou and Bean Read?
Sure. So what we do is we invite authors or illustrators onto our podcast who have made a book that we love. So Marti has been a guest on our podcast because we love her Jade and Toussaint books. And so we just started reaching out to authors and saying, we love your book. Would you come on our show? And what happens is the author will sometimes read a portion of their book and sometimes not, depending on permissions and things like that. We always want to be clear that we have permission to read things, but oftentimes the author will read a little bit. And then my kids, my daughters, Lou and Bean, are aged 6 and 8 now. They were 4 and 6 when we started, so things have changed a lot over the last 2 years. But they will then interview the author or illustrator about their book, about their work, about their life, about what they're reading, anything that comes to their mind, which can be a whole range of things since they're 6 and 8. But the whole point of it is to connect families and kids to a podcast that they can listen to together that is about kids' books and led by kids.
Yeah, I love that. I think that that's my favorite part about your podcast. Your daughters are amazingly bright and they're really charismatic and interested. It's not so, wait, charismatic is the wrong word. They're interested. And it really comes across, and the kinds of questions that they ask. And yeah, it really comes across, which is attractive for a person like me who loves to see kids being actually engaged and interested in things. So then that's really cool. And so I was already bragging to Elena off air, so I'll say it again on air about you, which is that I think that the format of your podcast is amazing and just really indicative of a really strong approach and a respect for kids that I think a lot of times ends up being lacking in the world. Letting your kids actually take charge in a lot of ways, and then supporting them enough that they can have a really professional end product come out of their work, I think is just exactly the role that parents are supposed to play. And so then I love that you are highlighting that kind of thing and boosting it out into the world. But I bet that a lot of people who are listening are wondering about the thing that you said, where you said books that we love, and then we just reach out to authors. Can you unpack that a little bit more?
Honestly, I think there are lots of, I have, since we started this podcast, I've connected with a lot of other podcasters who do this. And I think we have a different approach at Lou and Bean Read than a lot of kids podcasters have, because it's kid-led. It can't just, the books that we pick for our podcast can't just be, we heard this is going to be the next big book, or we know a book publicist who wants to publicize this book. Because if those people come on and my kids aren't connected to the book, they're not going to do a good podcast. And so honestly, truly, the people that we invite on our podcast are books that we've read, that we love, and that my kids got excited about. And then I say, hey, do you want me to email that person? And they're like, yeah, sure, that sounds great, and then they have a base, that's why I think what you're picking up on is when my kids interview someone that they're really excited about, they come up with their own questions and they really lead the conversation. If I picked the book, which I have a couple times, and then we do the interview, they're not leading. They're looking to me for leadership, and we don't come up with a product that is as good as it could be. And it's not showing that unique leadership quality that children have, and excitement and charisma, that you mentioned. None of that comes across if they're not excited about the book. So I think I think there are multiple different kinds of ways podcasters connect with books. For us, it is completely kid-led.
Yeah.
Is that really unique? Like there's nothing else online like that? I would imagine it is.
I mean, I can't speak for everyone because I don't know their process, but I do know that a lot of times the way that podcasters and bloggers are connected to brands is through publicists or through publishers or through,
Right.
the marketing channels that make a book
Yeah.
successful in the marketplace. And that is not the way sometimes that's the way we're choosing books for our blogs because we come across great books that way too. But that's generally not the way that we're coming up with the authors that we highlight on our podcast.
Yeah.
So how do you find the books? Do you just hunt in the library, look online? Like, how do you find them?
Sometimes it's totally random. Like we find a great book at the library, but more often I use the same tools that other parents are using. I look at Instagram and see what books are happening right now. I follow a lot of bookstagrammers. I don't know if you're connected to the bookstagram community, but it's amazing and it's super fun. And it's all people who love books and taking pictures of books and talking about books that they love and authors that they love. So I find a lot of books that way. I'm connected to a lot of authors and illustrators on Twitter. I'm following blogs that I respect, that I think choose good books. And I'm watching publishers. I'm watching what's being published every week. And requesting those books from the library or purchasing them, or sometimes we get some review copies from publishers as well. So a lot of the same ways everyone's finding new books.
Do you find you have like some indie books in there? Obviously you had Marti, like, so that's good. But is it mostly trad published? Is it like, do you find a difference in quality? Like, quite honestly, because remember, you're not affiliated, like I know indie people, we always go, our books are great. But, like there is a difference in them. Like when I read trad published versus indie books,
yeah,
I find a difference in it. Still great, but in different ways. I'd love your perspective on that.
Well, I think there's a huge range of all kinds of books. There's a huge range of traditionally published books, and there's a huge range of indie or self-published or small publisher books in terms of what we like and what we connect to. Like I found Plum Street Press, Marti's publisher, through Facebook, through an advertisement directed towards me. And then we requested the books, and we have since bought all the books, and that is how we found her. But I think that there are great self-published books like Marti's, and there are lesser quality self-published books. And I think in any kind of writing, however it's published, the indication of how good it's going to be is how much time and energy and effort and heart and love you put into it. And so my guess is that most really great self-published books go through the same process as really great traditionally published books, which is they are critiqued professionally, and the authors have a critique group, and they're using professional illustration, and they're valuing marketing in all the same ways that a traditional publisher is valuing marketing. So I don't think it's how the book is published. I think it's what is going into creating that book.
So if you were like, when you guys are looking at new books, so you've pulled books in, and I know that y'all are library people and also bookstore people. And so what kinds of things catch your attention when you are in the places that you're looking for books?
Oh, I think for children's books, illustrations are huge. I mean, the illustration drawing you in, and that's just a personal preference, right? Like what things are catching your eyes. We're always looking for diverse books, and I mean that in a lot of different ways. We're looking for racial diversity. We're looking for strong books about strong women and girls. We are looking for books that show different types of families. We're interested in multiracial families. We're interested in social justice books. So like themes and values that fit our family is another key way that we're choosing books. And then we like funny books. We like fun. We like to laugh. We like to have fun. We come back to those books over and over again, the books that make us laugh the most.
Absolutely. So I'm still trying to there's a little piece in there that I'm like trying to get my finger all the way on, right? So then there's a way that you as a mom, which is a great thing for our community to be thinking about, right? So a lot of times when we are talking and we're thinking together about marketing, what we're thinking about is how many layers of gatekeepers there are in front of kids, right? So then we don't have that many opportunities to be able to get like directly to kids without going through gatekeepers. So then we're thinking in our marketing and in our approach, how is it that you make something that is exciting for the gatekeepers, the moms, the teachers, the librarians, the grandparents, like that, right? But also is super exciting for the kids when they read it as well. So when you as a mom, this is, I think, a great thing to think about in this context. When you as a mom are helping your kids look at books and choose books, how much choice do they have in there, right? Like how much are you sort of steering them toward things that like reflect your family values, as you were just talking about a minute ago, and how much do they just get to like run in and be like, yes, this one with the fairies, let's go.
I think that's evolving over time because they're getting older now. And so when they were younger, I got to have all the control. I got to choose everything. I got to say, no, I'm not reading the Barbie books, and now that they're getting older, they have their own library cards and they get to go to the bookstore and choose a book that they want to read. And so I have less and less, and they go to school and they get to choose library books at school for themselves. And so I'm interested as a parent in letting them have that choice and then talking to my kids about what they're choosing. So when my daughter read the entire Little House on the Prairie series, we had a talk about the way Native people are portrayed in that series and how that was deemed okay by white people when this was written, but now it's not. And it never was, and it still isn't. And let's talk about that. And so I didn't say, no, you can't read it. I said, okay, read it and let's talk about it. And so I from a marketing perspective, in terms of like what you're making and how you're making it for jump off the shelves for kids.
Right.
They're looking, you know what your kids are looking for. They're looking for like fun, silly, funny illustrations. They want to know what the bigger kids are reading. Like my daughter is into Greek mythology now. I have never once read anything about Greek mythology in my entire life. She's read every book she can get her hands on Greek mythology because she was introduced to it from the big kids. So, I mean, so much of this in this world is subjective and it's based on what is attractive to individuals. And my interest as a parent is not to be a gatekeeper. My interest is to engage with my kids around what they're reading and have real conversations with them about it, and then let them continue to choose and evolve and become their own people as they get older.
Okay. So at what point, you mentioned that you were a part of the Bookstagram community, or that you've been like connected to the Bookstagram community. We had a chance to talk with Charnay Gordon the other day, who does Here We Read. And so that was really awesome. But I would love to hear, because you do have an Instagram page and an Instagram following, how do people get your attention in that way? And you can obviously talk from more than your perspective, but like we would love to hear from you too.
Yeah. First of all, I love Charnay and I love Here We Read. I learn about a lot of books from her. So we learn about what I am attracted to on books. Bookstagram is me, right? Like Lou and me have nothing to do with that. And I think that this is a huge, huge underutilized marketing tool for all book authors, illustrators, publishers. Everybody should be using Bookstagram. I am attracted to very beautiful images. We all are. You can like these. Do you know what a flat lay is? A flat lay is basically a flat surface with a bunch of really beautiful things set out to draw your eye. And that's what has become Instagram central. Like that is like the quintessential thing that you're looking for on Instagram. And so my flat lays, I've learned how to do them over time. And
your flat lays look amazing, by the way.
They're sometimes successful and they're sometimes not, based on the lighting available to me in the Minnesota winter. But I'm just always drawn to the visual presentation of books on there. And so I think that not enough authors are doing that. Book bloggers are getting really good at it. There's a lot of people that are way better than me on Bookstagram at producing beautiful images, but authors and illustrators and publishers I think are a little bit behind the curve there. I would love to see more authors using Instagram as a tool to market their book. And so what we do is when we find any way that we get a book, library, publisher, bookstore, whatever, we take pictures of them and we write a blurb about what we really think about this book, which is important because you shouldn't be putting things, we're not promoters. We are honest reviewers of books. But I don't put books on it that I don't love because what's the point? So we're taking pictures. We are promoting books for authors for free. Like we don't get, for the most part, some bloggers will get paid for these types of things. We're doing all this because we love books and we're putting them out there for free. So why not connect with people who are doing that for you? There's like thousands of book reviewers out there doing this. And they'll take really pretty pictures and then you can use them on your social media. And it is this big, wonderful book loving community that is supporting each other. And you should be on it if you're not.
So I feel like I would pay money for somebody to host, and I'm just putting this out there in the universe, and maybe it ends up being you, Tracy. I feel like I would pay money, and now I feel like I know that I would pay money for someone to do a live online flat lay tutorial, like where I can ask questions and be like, wait, because this is not the way that my brain works. So then why did you do it like that? Or was there some principle, or did you just know like in your bones that when you did it like that, it was going to sparkle? Did you have to do 100 different tries before you got it right? Like there's so many things. We could do like a whole thing just on the flat lay.
Well, the only thing that I know is use natural light. And so I'm like, I have these, you know what I use? I use poster boards. And I put them down on a flat surface and I put it right next to a window on my desk and I use my iPhone camera. And then I just use the Instagram filters to make it look a little bit better. I don't have any tricks that are expensive or in any way professional.
That's good to know though, like that's possible. And also for me, it's really good to hear that that's a thing. A lot of times like I am like, so then I assume other people are like too. What am I supposed to be posting about? Like I have things that are happening in my life that I would be happy to share with people, but all the time, like about my books, like that seems obnoxious.
Yes, this is like across social media. This is so important. Support other authors, support other illustrators. If you share other people's stuff, they will share your stuff. If you support other authors and illustrators, they will support you. If you support bloggers, there is like nothing worse in the feeling in your heart when you put out and tag authors and illustrators on Instagram or Twitter and they just ignore it. And you know they saw it because you can see they're on there, but they don't respond. Those people are doing like out there reading your book and promoting it. Give them some love, retweet it, regram it, do all the things to make sure that your people see it and that other people love your book. I think just building, that's how social media really can become community and not just a promotional tool. And what I have found is the more authentically I use those platforms, so to really connect with other humans and not just be like, hey, read my blog post, listen to my podcast, then the more support and community and reach that those tools have for me.
Yeah, it's really good. Elena, I have another one, but I don't want to jump.
Go. I could feel you were about to go first.
Okay. So in terms of, so like, let's say that I am an author. Well, I am, but let's say that I am an author and I think that I would like to be a part of, I really want to be on the Lou and Bean podcast, or I want to end up being featured on your blog. What would I do? Would I just like need to sit tight and hope that one day you guys stumbled upon me, or like what would happen?
No, that wouldn't be a very good strategy because most likely, there's like so many books that we can't even keep up. People reach out to me by email and they just say, hey, I have this book. Could I send it to you? I don't know. I'm sure everyone has different resources when it comes to sending out a bunch of free books. I know we sell reading journals and there comes a point where you have to stop sending out the free stuff, right? Like I get that. But I think when you have a new book coming out, decide to set aside X number of copies as review copies and have a list of bloggers, podcasters, influencers in some way that's relevant to your book and send a copy to them. We have a book review policy on our website, which says like, great, send us your book and hopefully we'll love it. And if we do, we'll put it on Instagram or our blog or we'll invite you to be in our podcast, but no guarantees. So that's just a reality. Sometimes we get backed up. Sometimes the book doesn't connect with us, whatever. But I think just send an email and say, hey, can I send you our book? And if so, if you like it, will you feature it? And that's the only way to really do it.
You make it sound so simple.
It's totally simple.
And not scary at all. Like you're making it sound very easy.
I think that a lot of this stuff is fear-based. Like I'm a mom in Minnesota with 2 kids who like books. I'm not a scary person. Other people that I know who do KidLit podcasts are librarians and teachers and people who like people. So they're not going to be mean to you. They may say, this book isn't for me. Good luck, but they're not going to be mean to you. So there's no harm in reaching out to them and asking them to help promote your book, especially if you're willing to send them a review copy, which most people probably won't turn down.
Okay. So if you were, wait, this is a follow-on direct to that. And then you, Elena. Okay. So then if you were sending someone or had review copies, let's say you had put aside 50 or 100 or whatever review copies of your book to be able to send out to people. If I reached out to you and I said, I would like to offer you a review copy, is that the kind of thing where it's like gauche to do that? Is that way too forward? Should I wait for you to be like, sure, if you send me a review copy, or do I just say it right up front?
I do like when people ask first, because then I can send them my book review policy and then I can know that they've seen it and know that, if they're sending me their book, there's a chance that we won't do anything with it, because I would feel awful if someone sent it to me and I didn't use it and they didn't know that going in. So, but I have had authors send me their books without contacting me first. And then I usually just follow up with them by email and say, hey, I got your book. Tell me more about yourself. Everyone's going to handle this stuff different ways. This is how I handle it. I like to know authors. I like to know illustrators. I learn from you. I'm trying to write children's books too. So every time that we interview an author, I'm learning from you guys too. So I love it. So I just say, reach out, send an email. If it gets lost in the inbox, it gets lost in the inbox, but it can't do any harm.
Oh, not saying no before, like, so that someone else doesn't say no.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, now Elena.
Okay, so the world is such a subjective place, and it kind of terrifies me, when I send the book out to, like I used a review service recently. Actually, it was a little while ago, but it was interesting. Like everybody on that review service, I think they read a lot of romance books. They were like romance book readers. So a lot of them came back and said, like, oh, the book was really boring. I don't think my grandchild would like it. And I'm like, but your grandchild hasn't actually read it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I get really kind of like anxious as an author about sending the book out and getting the dear opinion of others. Like almost like a part of me says, well, I like it, right? And my kids love it and my readers love it. And now I'm really scared to send it out to someone who goes, hate it. And I know that's just completely my issue because I'm completely the insecure interviewer of the two of us, which I've no qualms in, like covering up in any way, shape or form, have I? But for the other insecure people out there, what advice would you give them, Tracy?
Okay, well, first of all, I think I've never met a writer, including myself, that wasn't insecure. So I don't think you're in any way odd in this way. Okay, so here's the way I approach this. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I know that you put your heart and soul into your book. I know that you did everything you could to make with your resources available to you, to make your book the best it could be. I don't ever want to tell you I don't like your book. That's the worst case scenario for me. So here's what I do. If I don't like your book and you send it to me, I will definitely review it on Goodreads, because I think Goodreads reviews are good for everyone. You should not read Goodreads reviews if you don't want to know if people don't like your book, because that is a horrible place to live. I will definitely not tag you on social media if I give you a bad review. And I mean, a bad review, like I'm talking like a 3. Like we're not like, unless your book is like outright racist, wrong, horrible in some awful way, we're not going to give you like a horrible rating. But we're not going to tag you on social media if we don't want you to have your feelings hurt. If we love your book, we're tagging you for sure. But if we don't, we're not going to hurt your feelings in that way. I don't tag people on Instagram. And oftentimes, mostly I don't post things on Instagram unless they are like way up there for us, because I don't want to hurt people's feelings. Because even if I'm offering a minor critique, that can be really painful for an author to read. Like a lot of times I'll write this glowing review and then I'll have one thing, I wish this would have been different. And I still think really hard about whether I want to tag an author on that, because that's your product and it's done and it's finished and it's out in the world. And it should be your decision whether you want to seek that kind of feedback. I shouldn't be in your face, in your inbox saying, hey, here's what I would have changed about your book. So I have a set of criteria that I use when I'm going to put stuff out there in the world to make sure that I am protecting you as an author or illustrator from seeing a negative review. And I think that you should protect yourself too from seeing that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a lovely approach. And I'm glad you said that about Goodreads, because like I've been reading some trad published books recently, and put a review up on Goodreads and, put like 4-star, and, like I tend to really critique, like I didn't like the ending because the climax wasn't the way I wanted it to be. And then when I finish, I feel really guilty. Like I'm like, oh, was I allowed to write like anything bad about any book, when I put it up there? But isn't that what a real review is? Yeah. And then I think, but if people are going to see that Elena Page wrote a bad review about, well, not a bad review, but a critique-y review about that book, are they going to think, gosh, she's harsh? So, now all this is happening in my head, but at the end of the day, what I suppose concerns me about it is I don't want to just look all rainbows and sunshine to the world, and necessarily go out and be like, no, I love your book because I'm sucking up, and I love your book because it's about the book. It's not actually about the author. Like, so I want to be able to be honest, and I'm assuming you guys want to be in that same position, that you don't feel as though, you have to not be honest.
Well, I think being honest is important to the extent that you have integrity about your reviews, right? And that's where the difference between being a promoter and being a reviewer comes in. So I'm not promoting books. So that's why I want to do honest reviews. But first of all, we never want to attack the author or the illustrator. We never want to make things personal. And it's always about the technique or the storyline or the character development or some plot hole that we saw. It's not about, is this a good piece of art, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Good or bad. This is like my reaction to it. And so, we just try to make it not personal, and then we try to limit how people can see anything that's negative.
Terrific.
So I want to go back a little bit to something that the both of you were saying before, because I think that this is a thing that we run into a lot, which is the idea that sometimes parents pick books that kids don't necessarily pick or get into, or sometimes a kid would pick a book that a parent doesn't necessarily pick or get into. So then when you're like trying to go at both of them at the same time, sometimes there's a little bit of a disconnect there. I think one of my favorite reviews ever on a book that I've written was one where the grandmother says, I am the grandmother. I really did not like this book. However, my 7-year-old granddaughter read it and loved it. Then my 9-year-old granddaughter read it and loved it. Then my 11-year-old granddaughter read it and loved it. So I guess I am wrong. I was like, that's yeah. Like that's great, you know. So then and truthful, right? On all the levels, but like how like if you were giving people advice, like would you tell people to like go for the grandmother and like say directly, hey, could you get the kids to read this? Or like as a parent, are you like, my kids are going to read what they read, like I can put it out there and they'll try it or they won't, like is there any advice in there?
I think you got to write a book that kids are going to love. I mean, bottom line, if I read a book that I think is wonderful and my kids don't like it, they're never going to pick it up again. I'm going to have to force them to read it. And in fact, we recently bought a like best-selling book that I just think is amazing, and I cry every time I read it, and I cannot stop crying. And they've said now, Mom, we are not reading this book with you anymore. You like this book, but we don't like you to cry at bedtime every night. So you have to write a book that speaks to the kids. That has to be the foundation of what it's all about, right? So that's the writing part of it. The marketing part of it, I think, is going to parents, but also to some other gatekeepers that you mentioned, which are librarians and teachers earlier. And so that is a way for people who are really knowledgeable about kids' books to get their hands on your book. So I'm not I know that publishers send ARCs out to librarians and teachers, advanced reading copies, and I don't know what you would know better than I am. What are the practices of small indie presses and self-published authors with regard to librarians and teachers?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, just probably the same as big publishers, but with a smaller budget and not a whole table at at the SCBWI conference. We probably don't have a booth there, but being like getting in contact and saying like, these are the selling points for kids and these are the selling points for teachers, and everybody gets a win out of this. It has been our approach in doing that. But I often wonder, like, because as I know myself as a parent, like I know how I think. Like there are some books that I am not willing to buy. I'll say, sure, you can read that right here in the bookstore. Like, have a seat, read that one. I'm not paying money for it. And then there are ones that they bring to me that I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Like I would totally pay money for this book. Like I'll buy it. So I'm always curious about like how other people handle that, or like how, because then that unlocks a thing for us as authors. Like we have a bunch of authors who are like, oh, I've written the silliest, funniest, like best book, but like it's not getting picked up. And I don't know, there's something in there, I think. So like, tell us a little bit about how that goes for you.
Yeah, so the ones that I say no to buying are the books that are clearly just like a marketing, like a commercial product. So like licensed characters. You may take out as many licensed character books from the library, but we are not buying those books. That's just, I mean, that doesn't speak to me from a literature and a learning perspective, but I'm fine if they're reading them for the most part. We just don't buy them. We buy books that are, really high quality reading material. So even now, as my youngest, Bean, is transitioning into being an independent reader. So now I'm looking for books, like she'll come up to me with a book that's too easy for her to read. And I am happy to have her read it. I would never say, no, you can't read that book. But I don't want to buy it because I know she's not going to stick with it and come back to it and read it over and over again. So I'm trying to buy books that are challenging her a little bit. And then from the library, we'll get those fun, funny, easier books that she's going to read in 1 minute, So, so for me, I guess it's, can I see this becoming a part of my family's routine reading materials? And so is it either high quality? Is it high quality and super funny? And I know that we'll laugh as a family as we read it, so we'll want to come back to it. Or is it teaching my family some sort of value that I want them to know, and so that we'll keep reinforcing this as a group. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, it's useful.
And what I'm hearing from, like having interviewed a couple of book bloggers now, is to make sure that you target the right, and I don't mean target as in target, but make sure that you send your book or approach the right blogger or Instagram person for you that matches your values, just like their values, because they're going to look for those sort of books, right?
Right. So if you have a diverse book, you should definitely be talking to Charnay at Here We Read. You should be talking to us. You should be talking to biracial bookworms. There's a whole community of bloggers that are focused on diverse books. We don't only feature diverse books, but we feature a lot of diverse books. So there's other ones that are in the mix for us. And I couldn't even begin to tell you what the criteria around that is. It's just stuff we love. But yeah, there are people that only focus on middle grade. There are people that focus on just picture books. I think Charnay, for example, at Here We Read, for now, is focusing more on picture books because that's the age of her kids. Mine are kind of in a transition phase where we're still reading both. And some people are doing middle grade and YA because that's the phase of life or the phase of reading that they're at. So target them for what they're reading. Just go to our website. You can see what we're reading and what kinds of books we're featuring, and what you can read what we liked about them, right? On every blog post, we'll tell you right there, what attracted us to this book? What keeps us coming back? What type of reader would we recommend this book to? All of it's there. So you can find that information on any book blogger's website.
And where do you find other book bloggers? Like, do you know what I mean? Do I just go to Google and write book bloggers?
No, that's really hard because that's all dependent on SEO, on search engine optimization. And when I first started this, I didn't think that there were many book bloggers out there because I did a ton of Google research and didn't find very much. And so I was like, wow, I'm going to corner this market right away. But then I got onto Instagram and I realized there are literally thousands of people doing this. And so I think I would start at Instagram. Look at the Bookstagram hashtag. Look at the kids Bookstagram hashtag. Podcasts, if that's what you're interested in. I always tag it kids podcast because that's our focus area, and sometimes family podcast. But there are hashtags that you can research to find who is doing this, who's blogging, and then who you really like who's doing blogging that really resonates with you and the type of book that you wrote.
Mm-hmm. So you've told us a lot of the positive, like the proactive things that we can do. What are some of the things we definitely shouldn't do?
Don't reach out to me and ask me to buy your book because I can't. There's so many books, I can't buy them all. That happens to me once in a while. Don't reach out to me and ask me to ask people to buy your book on your behalf. That is a very organic process that's going to happen. And a lot of people will reach out and they'll want to know, what proof do you have that this is going to sell books? And I can say, I have very limited metrics about that, but it's not about, here's one important thing. Okay, I'm glad you thought that. That's funny.
That's so funny. Wait a minute. Okay, so now I need more information about that. So people for your absolutely free service that costs you time and money to do, right? People ask you what proof you have that it's going to sell books.
Yeah, what's the payoff here? How many books can I expect to sell from this post?
Wow. All right.
And so, but here's one thing I wanted to say about that, because it is absolutely never about one post. It is about people seeing your book pop up in their feeds 5 times, 10 times. It's the buzz, right? People don't even necessarily need to read my post. They should, because obviously, but but if they don't read it, if they see my picture and Charnay's picture and Bethany over at Biracial Bookworms picture and 4 other bloggers picture of your book, they're going to be like, oh, I should check this one out. I should look at this one at the bookstore, or I should go to the library and request that as soon as possible. And oftentimes too, I think this is important for small press, indie press type people. If I see books that are coming up multiple times in my feed and I go to my library and they don't have it, and I have a pretty big library system, I will go and request that book be purchased from the library. So even if I'm not buying it directly, it can still lead to sales for your book.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Our little press has not done any library outreach yet. It's in the works, like it's out there, like it's in the plan, but we're still probably 4 steps away from that. So then that means that every place, like if you can get our books in the library, it's because someone requested it, and maybe because of exactly what you just said, right? Like they saw it on Instagram, they saw it, on Facebook or whatever, and they couldn't get it at their library, and so they said, "Oh, I'll ask for it."
Right. And that works at bookstores too, right? Like I remember when you were going to be on the podcast, we had returned our library books, and so I went to our local bookstore and said, "I need these Jade and Toussaint books. Do you have them?" And they were like, "Oh, we used to, but they're all sold out." And so she was like, "Let me just order those again." And so every time you can do that, even if I never came back for those books, it'd be in the bookstore.
Yeah,
so it's
absolutely. Same deal. All right, very cool. All right,
have the girls ever interviewed any authors that they thought, gosh, that author's boring in real life?
Well, you know what? That's what I'm talking about when I say they really have to be connected to the book, because if it's totally me, it could be the best book in the world. They are not into it at all. So I have learned through time and experience that they need to pick the books. Otherwise, they're just so bored. They're like,
and it's not necessarily the author's fault.
No, it's really not the author's fault. And it's an awkward thing to be interviewed by kids, because they don't always know what to do. They don't know how to transition conversations and what to say next. And so there'll be long pauses where no one knows what to say. And then they'll look at me like, what do we do? And I help them out. And that all gets edited out in the final thing. But it does interrupt the flow of a conversation in a way that can be really hard for people who aren't used to doing interviews, recorded interviews. So it's just, now I started telling everyone when we start out, there are gonna be awkward moments. We'll totally edit them out. Don't let it throw you off your game.
So I would love to hear some of your tips about working with children to do a thing. I think a lot of the people that we talk to we have like a little Facebook group where we powwow and try to figure stuff out. Whenever the subject of school visits or being at a festival or something where you might have a table with your books comes up, there are some people who are super confident already about interacting with children and making it so that children are kind of empowered in the activity. And then there are some people who are like, oh my gosh, but I wasn't a teacher, so I have no idea what to do. So do you have tips on that? I know that Lou and Bean are your own children, so you have had a lot of time to hang out with them, but do you have tips on engaging kids in a way that they feel like they are taking the lead?
Yeah. So we actually have done several episodes where we have gone to schools and recorded episodes and let kids that we had never met before help us produce the podcast, which is always like a scary thing that always works out really well. And so my experience in that scenario, which is different than working with my own kids, is there's some of the same takeaways. Kids are really smart, so treat them like they're smart. When I have been to book readings, the coolest things that I have ever seen happen at bookstore readings with my kids is when we have gone through, the author gets up and reads their book, and then we'll ask some questions about very detailed stuff that happens in the book. And the kids are always the only ones who notice that stuff. I'll be like, what is, I didn't notice that at all. And
they're like, a blueberry on page 9, right?
And yet you messed that up. And then, so that is really cool. Kids love to know the backstory of how you got the idea and how you made it into a product. They love to know the process of making books. They think every book, every author is a celebrity that's like very wealthy, and they just want to know about you. They want to know about how you got this cool job. And they are super engaged at the elementary level. What I am continually impressed by is no matter what age of elementary school child I am working with on a project, they are so engaged and really interested in learning. And I think if you go in, I think some people go in thinking like, oh, these fifth graders are not going to want to talk about this. You know, like that's like a scary age. It's like they're grown people now, but they're not. They're like, I mean, they are grown people with their own ideas and they're really smart, but they're also really, really into learning and engaging with creative people and being creative on their own. I mean, activities I think are really. Do you have Jane Toussaint activities?
Yes, we do.
You know, I think that is all great, but the thing that's they're going to relate the most to is you're telling them the inside scoop on how you created this thing that they're holding in their hands right now. Yeah. Like that is what they get excited about.
Yeah. There are the most below, or the one that I can translate across the most age groups, because those books sit in a weird spot in terms of like directly who they're for, right? So sometimes it might be a group of first graders, but sometimes it also might be a group of fourth graders, which is really different developmentally. But the one activity that works really well is first having everyone come up with who their protagonist would be for the story, what the real person's protagonist like problem might be for their story, right? And how they might end up solving that. And so they sort of start to write their own, or they are sort of outlining their own. And then I tell them the backstory about the exact same thing for the first Jane Toussaint book. And then, and we kind of go from there. So then that, for me, like, it's like, this is really about you. It's not about me. Like, you already read my book. That's most of what I had to say. But like, what are you getting at? Like, how does this impact your life? Like, how does this like leverage your creativity? So yeah, that kind of, I feel like that kind of resonates then with what you just said. We are getting close to the end of our time. Elena, do you have one more question that you want to? You always have one more question, but do you want to have one more? Do you have one more question that you want to ask Tracy before we have to let her go?
I could talk to you all day, Tracy. Like seriously. I find you so much fun and so interesting. You know everything about everything. Sorry for my coughing. Hopefully you'll edit that bit out. I wanted to ask about going back a lot of steps, and hopefully it's not too long an answer, but you mentioned like you found Marti's book on Facebook. And like, what was she advertising? Like, what made you click? Do you still do that these days? In terms of, you know, Facebook being a useful way to promote, like what grabbed your attention?
Okay, well, I have mixed feelings about Facebook if we're talking only about Facebook. I used to have a page on Facebook for Lou and Bean Read, and I decided to abandon that because the only way I could reach people was to pay for it. Otherwise, they weren't 400 people showed me or signed up to get my information, and like the average post would be showed to 30 people. So that didn't seem like a good use of time. So that's there, but I don't use it. But in this case, the example that you're talking about, Marti and Plum Street Press, were paying for it. And so somehow through the magic algorithm, they targeted me because they knew I liked books and I liked kids' books. And so it showed up on my feed, and yes, I clicked on it, and yes, it led to many purchases of books. So that was a successful strategy. I think Facebook is great if you know how to make an ad and target it to the right people. I think Facebook is not that great if you are just putting things out into the world for free. It's just not working that way anymore. That's my opinion.
And do you respond more to, like, for example, here's the first free book in the series kind of ad, or do you respond to buy this fantastic book sort of ads? Like, what appeals to you personally when you
I'm just looking at images, no matter what social media platform. I'm looking at images, I'm looking at endorsements from other people that I respect. and reviews from other bloggers that I like and know their values. And so really, it's not about the language of the advertisement. I'm like, and I keep a running list in my planner of books that come across social media for me, and then I have a dedicated time on Fridays. I'm a little bit regimented in this way. I have a dedicated time where I go into my library system and I request all the books that I wrote down. So I wrote down Dating Toussaint, and that's how it got into my list. And that's just that's my process. It's a good process. If you see a lot of
they're looking for a process, right?
Yep.
So, Tracy, thank you. It has been really, really super helpful. I don't know. I think that I did not warn you about this at the beginning, but I knew I was forgetting something. But here's the thing that I forgot, which is that Elena and I legitimately use these conversations to workshop from. So while we've been talking, I've been taking notes, and I have 3 things that, for me, because of this conversation, like that I'm going to add, like either to think about or to do in my workflow, including a reminder that you maybe didn't intend, which is that we keep meaning to do a library campaign, like a campaign where we specifically ask people who've signed up with us to like request our books at the library, and it keeps like staying way down at the bottom of the to-do list. So then that was just a reminder also for me to bump that back to the top of the to-do list, besides all the other things that we've come out of it. So where can people this is the time when you pimp your services. Where can people find you online? And if there are things that you want to tell people where like you can specifically help them do a thing, then feel free.
Yeah. Okay. So we are first of all, I'm going to go and request your books from my library. So I'll be your first member of your library campaign.
Oh, you're so amazing, Tracy.
It's going on my library to-do list. Okay. So we are at LuandBeanRead.com, and we are on all social media platforms at Lou and Bean Read. At Lou and Bean Read is where you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, although we don't post that much anymore, and Twitter, which we didn't talk about a lot, but I use Twitter quite a bit, and a lot of my traffic to my blog comes to me from Twitter. So people should come to us for book recommendations, and they should come to us if they're looking for a podcast that they feel totally comfortable listening to out loud in their home with their children present. And I always tell people it's like a great thing to listen to when you want your kids to really like focus on coloring for 20 minutes, or like, let's do this thing, like sensory activity for 20 minutes, put it on in the background, because that auditory stuff keeps them engaged in other activities and gives you a little breathing room. They're all about 20 minutes long. And on our blog too, we also have reading journals. We have 2 different reading journals that we offer, and they're both focused on kids. So that kids, like I'm a Goodreads fanatic. As soon as I finish a book, I'm going straight to Goodreads to record what I liked and what I didn't and what my rating was. I just love it. And so I wanted to create something that is like the physical version of Goodreads for kids. And so we created these reading journals where kids can log all of their books and rate them and remember them.
That is very cool. And where can people find those journals? Just at luandbeanread.com, and then they have to click. Is there a tab at the top already for journals?
I believe it's /reading journals.
Okay.
Yeah.
Reading journals.
Yeah.
And we'll try to make sure that those are in the episode show notes so that people can easily click on them and purchase them. They're super cute, the journals.
Yeah.
I have tried to get my son to use it, but he's so far rejecting me. So I've learned now that I have to wait for him to ask for the thing in order for him to adequately use it. But I'm sure it'll happen. He comes around eventually. He just doesn't like when people like try to make him in the beginning. So that was my bad.
We do it because my kids just don't remember to use things. We just leave them all around the house, just thrown in random places, and then they'll use them.
They're super cute. But Elena, will you tell everybody where they can find us?
So you can find the show, including the show notes, at www.indiekidlitpodcast.com. Thank you again so much for being with us, Tracy. We've learned a heap, And you can catch our episode in future episodes where we're going to talk all about your episode and how we're going to integrate it into our author lives. But you've been just so wonderful.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a blast.
Thanks.